Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Lisa Paddock. I'm Regional Director and Central Team Leader here at InSource. And InSource is Indiana's Parent Training and Information Center. We help families understand that special ed process, and we work together with families in schools to help support students in their classroom. And we are so glad that you have joined us today for office hours with IDOE, Indiana Department of Education, and InSource. And so thank you so much, whether you're watching live or whether you watch it on demand later on our YouTube channel. So without any further ado, I will introduce Maggie Hampton. Maggie is the Assistant Technology, I knew I was going to mess that up, Technical Assistant Specialist. Sorry, Maggie. Technical Assistant Specialist at IDOE. And Maggie has planned and worked very hard with our office hours. We're so appreciative of her hard work. And she is going to present also today. And so she's going to talk about planning for that case conference committee meeting. This will be up on our YouTube channel if you give us a little bit of time. And this will be a link that you can send out to anyone. So we're going to talk about that all-important case conference meeting today. And if you have questions or comments, please just put them in the chat. And I will alert Maggie to those. So at this point, Maggie, take it away, and thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and thanks for joining. Like Lisa said, if you're here live or on demand, we're just happy to take some time to talk about getting ready for case conference committee meetings. So while we're talking today, I plan this as kind of an introduction to case conference committee meetings. So if you have a student and maybe you have been in a couple meetings, some of this might be a review for you. And you can definitely throw in some considerations or some things that you think of in the chat to kind of help some of our newer families. But I really wanted to make sure if you've never been to a case conference committee meeting, you feel confident and prepared to go into the next one that you have scheduled on your calendar. So like Lisa said, my name's Maggie Hampton. I'm with the DOE. I'm here to support you with providing resources and support. Really, InSource is the one that does a lot of support for you guys. They do just such a great job, but I'm here for you as well. So some of the things that we'll talk about today, I want to do just a little bit of an overview of special education in general, and then talk about what happens in those case conference committee meetings. And then after that, I want to give you some tips and tricks to prepare for that meeting. Make sure that you feel comfortable and confident when you do go into those case conference meetings. And then I always like to end with giving you some additional resources to keep on learning and digging in after our meeting today. Okay, so as a parent of a student with an IEP, you will go to several meetings to talk about your child's progress and plan for support. So we're going to start with just some basic information to really help you feel prepared. But please let me know if you have questions in the chat. Lisa will be keeping an eye out for those. When you go to meetings, you might learn some new vocabulary. And so I wanted to put some of those up on the screen here so you could see some of that commonly used terminology that you might hear in a case conference meeting. Sometimes they'll be called a case conference committee or a CCC. You might hear referred to as a CCC. We would talk about meetings. So there might be a couple different reasons why the case conference committee will meet. But that committee is really just a group of people, and that includes you as the parents. The public agency personnel is the people that work at your child's school. And the case conference committee, their job is to get together and determine at the beginning if the student is eligible for special education. But once they are eligible and they have that IEP, the case conference committee meets at least once a year to talk about what's in that IEP, what are the services, what are the goals, what are the pieces in that IEP document, and how can we update them if that's needed to fully support the student every year. So those case conference committee meetings, those are the times that you would meet to review and maybe make updates and changes to the IEP. So that could be on an annual basis. Maybe things are moving and grooving really well, and we meet once a year just to review things and update as needed. The case conference committee can also meet to review an evaluation. Maybe at the very beginning you had requested, or the school had talked to you about completing an evaluation to see if your student was eligible for special education. But even after that starts, you can request a reevaluation, or the school might look into a reevaluation. So the case conference committee might meet to look at another evaluation review and determine if there's updates needed to the eligibility. Another reason that a case conference committee might meet is to look at a manifestation determination, looking at if a student's behavior is a manifestation of their disability or something else. And in that case, there might be revisions and updates to the IEP. Or you can meet for a combination of these things. So all kinds of reasons that a case conference committee might meet. The most important thing for you as a parent to know is that if you would like to meet with your case conference team, you can request that meeting at any time, and we can get together and discuss that, whatever your concerns are there. The IEP, I've already mentioned that document, but the IEP is the written document that the case conference committee develops. And that really talks about how the student is going to participate in the general education curriculum, if they are participating, and then also what special education services, related services, what accommodations, what is needed to enable that student to participate in school and help them meet their goals. Parent is another term that's on here, and if you are here, you might be a parent, and this, just to make it clear for all of you, a parent in Article 7 is our Indiana rules around special education. So when we talk about parents, we might be talking about biological parents or adoptive parents. We might also be talking about an authorized guardian or a foster parent, or somebody that has legal custody and makes decisions for the parent. So it could be one of a couple different things, but it's the person that is making those decisions for the student. The public agency, that's another one that you hear, and for the most part, that is your school, but that is the public entity that is responsible for providing that special education and related services to students with disabilities. So oftentimes it's your local school corporation, but you might choose a charter school, and that would be your public agency if your student is going to a charter school. Programs that are operated by the Department of Correction are also included there. When we talk about educational evaluations, that is usually happening at the very beginning of this process. So an educational evaluation is the process, the procedures that we use to collect information about a student's disability, or if they haven't been eligible for a disability category yet, maybe this is looking at those materials to determine if they do have a suspected disability. So that evaluation process, it includes different kinds of assessments and observations of your student. There's also things like a social and developmental history, some questions for you as parents and family members to kind of share your observations about what you're seeing at home. And that all is to develop a very full picture of the student and determine based on that if the student is eligible for special education.
I'm going to go right
And then the
through
last
that.
very common term here that you will see, I have the acronym here, is FAPE. And FAPE stands for Free Appropriate Public Education. And that is what every student is entitled to. Special education and related services are to be provided at the public expense, at the school's expense, in accordance with your student's IEP, that they have a free, appropriate public education. So that looks different for every student because every student is unique, but your case conference committee is the one that determines what that free appropriate public education looks like. And they do that with you because you're a member of that case conference committee. So those are some really common terms that you might come across. This is a good, if you're new to this process, having those available so you can refer back to them. But if you don't, always feel like you can stop and ask the people in your case conference committee meeting, what did that term mean? Can you stop and describe that for me, what that means? Okay. I mentioned Article 7 is our Indiana special education rules, and they just describe how special education and related services are determined, and then also how they're provided for students between the ages of 3 through the school year in which they turn 22. There are 13 different eligibility categories that a student might qualify for, or maybe a combination of those, and basically all of the information about how we carry out providing special education is in that Article 7. You're more than welcome to look at that, but another document that breaks it down and into more user-friendly language is our Navigating the Course document. And this is actually newly updated in August 2025, so this month. And this is, like I said, the Article 7 is the legal document, the legal language, and then this Navigating the Course is that companion guide to break it down and describe what it means. So they're both pretty lengthy documents, but this one, you can flip through it and read different sections as they apply to you or as you have questions. So I wanted to put some just kind of main points in here of things that you can look up. So we've talked about vocabulary a little bit. There's lots of acronyms in special education. You can look up what those mean in here. If you're at different spaces, maybe in the IEP process, and you're thinking about asking about an evaluation or asking about a reevaluation, asking about timelines, maybe you're asking about something in the IEP or how that information is shared and the confidentiality of that information, all kinds of things in here. So you can search through this document. One thing I like to do, I'm just going to click on this here for a moment. Sometimes when I have questions is there's the search button here, or you can hit the Control F and then you can type in a term and then it'll come up in all of the places that it's there. So if I type in transition, it's going to bring me to all of those places that this document discusses transition. So I can look at early childhood transition or the transition IEP. And those are two different things that I can read about in there. So that's just a little bit about this document. It's definitely a great resource for referring back to if you have questions about what does the law say. This is a good place to start. Okay. All right. This right here is on this picture right here. This is a one-pager infographic document that I'm going to share in the resources at the very end, but it gives you a good breakdown of each of the different sections of the IEP. So if you maybe are in the evaluation process or you're new to this, the student's IEP is that it's a collaborative document that's created with the case conference committee all together to determine what the students' needs are and how to implement them. But it's also a legal document. It has all of the information about how services must be delivered and how progress needs to be reported and all of those other pieces. So this is a legal document, but we can make changes as needed. So you can always request for those changes. I did put this on here just as a reminder. It's important to remember that all members of the case conference committee, including you as parents, are part of determining what the IEP should contain. So definitely feel like you can participate in those conversations with your case conference committee team to talk about what you think needs to be focused on in addition to what the rest of the team thinks. These right here on the screen that you see, these are all the main components of an IEP. So you'll see when you look at an IEP document, usually that'll start with the student's present levels and where they are at currently. That includes academically, functionally, socially. So we're looking at the full picture of the student. If your student has had an IEP in the past, you might see some progress on their goals and where they're at with their goals. But this should always have a conversation about the student's strengths in that present level section as well. There is time at the very beginning of the IEP, and you can talk to your case conference team at any time. Your point person is probably your teacher of record, and you can voice your concerns to them at any time. But during those case conference committee meetings, there is a space for speaking to parent concerns, and those are documented in the IEP so that your parent concerns are listed there, and they should be worked through in these other sections. So after you look at the present levels and what your parent concerns are, the next thing you'll see is your student's eligibility. Like I said, there's 13 different categories. So those include eligibilities like autism, specific learning disability, cognitive disability, blindness, deaf, hard hearing. So depending on the eligibility of your student, then the rest of the document really takes in those considerations to build out what behavior concerns do we have, what special considerations look at. Does the student have any visual impairments or any needs for accessible educational materials like large print or braille? Are they an English learner and we need to take in their English learning needs as well? And then another special consideration that you look at is, does this student utilize assistive technology? So those are some of those special considerations. Behavior concerns, just like those other special considerations, not every student will have behavior concerns, but if there are behavior concerns, then those will be listed here. You would see information from a functional behavior analysis maybe, or a team decision that they need to look at that. And what that information is really just trying to look at what the root cause of some of those behaviors are, so that a plan can be put in place to try to work on improving those. That plan is called a BIP, or a behavior intervention plan. And if there are behavior concerns and that functional behavior analysis has been completed, the other thing you'll see in this section is a behavior intervention plan. Something else that you'll see in the IEP are those accommodations that are needed to support the student to meet their goals. So you would see things like, and these are all very individualized based on the individual student's unique needs. So not every accommodation will be chosen for every student, but you may see things like text to speech or speech to text. You could see things like maybe having a cool down break. You could see things like a calculator, a scribe. You might see different kinds of other information in there about accommodations. So you see in there, it says assessment and daily. You'll also see which of those accommodations are for just in the classroom daily use and which ones we would use on the statewide assessments. The next piece of the IEP is the special education services and provisions. And this is where it talks a little bit, the IEP talks a little bit about what services and supports, what kind of manpower is being put behind supporting the student. So you might see that educators are going into the general education classroom with your student to work with them on their goals, or you might see a student being pulled out of the gen ed environment into a separate environment to work on things. Maybe it's a speech goal, maybe it's an occupational therapy goal, maybe it's an IEP goal that needs a little bit closer attention and focus in outside of the general environment. So that would be listed there, what kind of services and supports. The next thing that you'll see is the annual goals, and these are the specific goals that we are working on with the student throughout the school year. These could be academic goals, these could be behavior goals, they could be communication goals or functional goals. But this is really taking a look at the student and what their individual unique needs are and building goals that are achievable for them to work on. The next piece that you'll see is transition. So the year that students turn 14 years old, we'll start talking to them a little bit about what their plans are for life after high school and working on different activities to support them and making sure they're ready. So whether that is maybe enrollment in a post-secondary environment, maybe it's enlistment with intention to serve, maybe they're looking at entering into the job force, but whatever their goals are there, we're looking to support them and making sure that they're ready for that in the transition space. And then the last thing that's on the IEP document is the LRE placement, and that's the least restrictive environment. So like we were talking about before, every student is entitled to a free, appropriate public education, and that should take place in their least restrictive environment. So looking at how often they're in the special education environment versus the general education environment, that is where that is discussed. And then the thing that ties all of this together is progress monitoring. Our progress monitoring, you're going to see every once in a while come home, at least as often as report cards. You'll see information about how the student is progressing in their goals. And so you can tell if they are making some progress in that, if that's something that they still need to work on and that they're still kind of needing some growth in. But that progress monitoring really gives you a good idea. And then as you continue to get those updates throughout the year, once the year is up, you'll look at that progress monitoring will be part of those present levels, and you'll start that process over again of reviewing all of that information to make sure that it's tied together, really to support your student. Please, I'm going to move on to this next part. We're going to talk a little bit about the meeting now, and I want to make sure that you ask questions if you have them. So if there are pieces of the IEP document or the overview of the meeting that you have questions about, please put those in the chat so we can address them. But let's talk a little bit about what is discussed in those meetings. So this is the definition right here of what a case conference committee is. We talked about this just a little bit ago with the definitions, but the case conference committee is that group of people, including the parents, and we talked about that public agency personnel or the people in the school that are working with your student in this case. So the parents and the public agency personnel get together and they determine if the special education services are appropriate or if they need to be revised. And then for those students who have been evaluated, but maybe they are not in the special education and related services yet, we're looking at that evaluation to see if they are eligible. So those people, like I said before, when we were looking at those definitions, the parents are members of the case conference committee. So sometimes when I was in the classroom and I was going holding case conference committee meetings, I met and encountered parents who felt like guests, and they would say, you know, you guys are the professionals, you make the decisions, and I will support that. But really, the parents are the professionals of their children, and they are the first advocate for their children, and they're really the expert on what their students need in a lot of different ways. So you are definitely a really important member of that case conference committee meeting, and we want to make sure that you feel like your voice is important and heard there. So you are a member. Some other people that are members, like I said, that there would be people from the school. So these are some of those people from the school. You'll have general education teachers if your student is in general education classes. You'll have your student's teacher of record, who is usually your point person and somebody that you would hear from fairly often, but they'll be at that meeting. You will have they're called a public agency representative from the school or the district. So usually this is maybe a special education director or a school principal, but somebody who can kind of coordinate the services and say, yes, we have that available, or no, we need to do some planning to make that available when you are determining what services and supports go into the IEP. The next person is an individual to interpret the evaluation results. So if your student is going through an evaluation, that document, can be a little cumbersome from somebody who is not familiar with it. So you want somebody who can explain to everybody in the meeting what those evaluation results mean. And that is true whether your student is going through an evaluation at that time, or if it's just a regular annual renewal, somebody needs to be able to speak to the evaluation because it's important no matter where the student is at on their journey. We need to have those with knowledge or special expertise regarding the student. So that might be the general education teacher and the teacher of record, but there might be additional teachers that that could be invited, or other service providers. We talked about occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy. Maybe those people will be important to invite. Maybe you have somebody in your life that has special knowledge or something important to share that you would like to bring as a guest to that case conference committee meeting, and they could be a participant as well. You want to let your teacher of record know so that they can prepare and have their name on the documents, but you are welcome to bring people that you think have special information, special knowledge, and expertise regarding your student. And then the year that your student turns 14, so they may be 13 turning 14 that school year, but that year they will start attending their case conference committee meetings as well. So these are all the people in the meetings that you will attend. Okay. We do get some questions about case conference committee members, so I just wanted to bring those up in case they're in your mind, but you're not typing them in the chat. One question is, what happens if somebody's unable to attend? And if somebody is unable to attend, then you as a parent and the district can agree in writing together that they are not needed. Those required members that we put on, I'm going to just pull this slide up again real quick. Okay. So these are the people that are required to be in a case conference committee meeting. But let's just say, for example, that the day of the meeting comes up and the general education teacher got a flat tire and is not able to make it into work that day. The school may come to you and ask if that's okay with you, and you can say, yes, that is okay, but I want to make sure that we have all of the information from that general education teacher that they would share. Or you could say, no, I would really like to hear from that general education teacher. Let's go ahead and reschedule. So those are options, and it's totally fine for you to choose either one. It might be somebody other than the general education teacher. That was just an example. But the important thing to remember here is that you and the school need to agree together that that is okay for them to not attend the meeting. And if it's not okay with you, then that is okay. The next question that we get, and we were actually, Lisa and I were talking about this earlier, does the team need to meet face-to-face? And the answer to that is no. Case conference committee meetings can be scheduled at mutually agreed upon dates, times, and places. So when you are scheduling those case conference committee meetings, if it's better for you to meet on Zoom so that you can make that time in your day a little bit more flexible, that is okay. Maybe the school building is not the best place for you to hold a meeting, but you do want to have a meeting in person. That mutually agreed upon place can be a library or somewhere close by. That's okay. But you need to agree with the person that you're scheduling with. Like I said, usually it's the teacher of record on a date, time, and place when you meet. And if you'd like to meet by Zoom, that's okay too. And then the next question that we get kind of often is, how frequently should this team meet, and how long are these meetings going to take? And that question, I can tell you that the team needs to review the IEP, meet and talk about it at least once a year. But as a parent, you can say that you would like to meet more often if that is the case. My son's a sophomore in high school right now, and I can tell you we maybe had a meeting for him at the very beginning of the school year, but I'm looking now that we're a month in, we might need to talk again. So I can call the school and I can schedule that meeting because I feel like there's some needs that need to be addressed. That's okay. You can request a meeting whenever you like, but at minimum, you will meet once a year. Along with that, sometimes there may be a point where the school sees a need to meet and they might contact you before that annual meeting for a reason to meet. When you're looking at the amount of time in a meeting, this is really this is very dependent on the committee, the communication that they've had in the past, also just the needs of the student and what's in the IEP document. So sometimes these meetings can, they can start and end within a half hour, and sometimes they take several hours. We have had some case conference committee meetings that I've seen that have gone, and they've decided to end after a couple hours and take it back up at another time. But the point is there that we'll talk about this in a moment. I'm going to get ahead of myself for just a moment, but the case conference committee, when they meet, they need to come to an agreement. And so that is what kind of determines how long those meetings take. Okay. So when we're looking at what the case conference committee needs to do, these are the responsibilities for the case conference committee when they meet. So anytime that they meet, they'll review the students' present levels of performance and then any progress monitoring that's available on those goals. The case conference committee is responsible for developing, reviewing, and revising the IEP. And then along with that, they determine the appropriate special education and related services that are needed. And then when they're talking about those services, once they've determined what services are needed, they need to think about where those services occur. Are they in the general education environment or the special education environment? When do they occur and how long do they occur? Is it maybe every day for 30 minutes? Is it maybe once a week as a check-in? And that really depends on what the service is and what the goals for those are. But you determine all of those specifics together as a case conference committee. And then anything else that relates to providing your student with a free, appropriate public education. So those are the responsibilities of the case conference committee meeting. So now I want to give you guys a little bit of some tips for planning for a case conference committee meeting. I'm going to be looking at this through the lens of an annual case conference committee, but a lot of these tips you can really take into any of those different kinds of meetings. If you're having a manifestation meeting, you might focus on some of these pieces and in a different kind of way, but you can reflect on some of these tidbits I'm going to share here for you. So we're going to start with some reflection questions. These are just some things to think about before you go into a case conference committee meeting, because you're the one that knows your child the best. So outside of the IEP document, just thinking about what are some goals and priorities that you have for your child. The IEP requires that the student's strengths and the parent concerns are captured at the beginning of the IEP. So thinking about that ahead of time gives you a chance to come up with something. Because sometimes when that question comes up in the meeting, what are your concerns? You might not have any that you can think of directly in the moment, but this IEP is for the full year. So you want to make sure you give some thought to that so that those concerns can be addressed. You have the knowledge about what has worked for your child and what hasn't worked for them in the past. So you can also think about things that could support your child and what you think is necessary for them to benefit from their IEP. So these are just some of the things that you can think about before the meeting to jot down. Okay. You can also think about these questions before the meeting. Think about who you want present at the meeting. You can ask when the teacher of record or whoever is calling you to schedule that annual meeting, you can ask them, who's coming? If you have a middle schooler or a high schooler, they have more than one general education teacher most likely. So which ones are attending. If your student is struggling in math class, but it's the ELA general education teacher that's slotted to come, you can ask, can that math teacher also attend? So I can ask some questions about that. You can think about those additional family members. If they are coming, you can let them know ahead of time. You can think about who would you want to invite. And then you can also think about, do you want your child to be present at the meeting? They would be invited if they're at transition age, but if you want your child present beforehand, if you think that that's beneficial, you can talk about that ahead of time. And then if it's appropriate, you can ask your child about any of their concerns, asking them to kind of reflect on some of their successes and struggles. I know at my house, we call it our roses and thorns. We kind of go through that fairly often. What were your roses and thorns for the day or for the week? But maybe if you're having those conversations and you're hearing the same thorns pop up, the same struggles, that might be something that you can bring up in the meeting to see if there is something that we could work on there. Okay. I'll give you some different documents that you can look at ahead of time, just as you are getting ready and as you're doing your reflecting. So before the case conference committee, you should get a notice of case conference committee meeting. So like I said, somebody will usually reach out to you to try to schedule that. But our Article 7, those Indiana rules for special education, they tell us that a case conference committee meeting must be scheduled at that mutually agreed date, time, and place. And that if the parent cannot attend in person, that the school must use other methods to ensure your participation. So that could be those phone conferences, video conferences. But you have to be given adequate notice as a parent of the case conference committee meeting in your native language or other mode of communication. If you are not a native English speaker, then that notice should be in your native language. And then that notice needs to be given early enough to ensure that at least one, but if both parents would like to attend, that they have the opportunity to. So you're going to get that notice that would have those components, and you can look at that to pay special attention to what the purpose of the meeting is. If it says annual, then that's your annual meeting. But if you have questions about that, maybe if it says something else, you can ask, what is the purpose of this meeting? What are we planning to discuss here? And then also that expected participant list, thinking about who is attending, who is requesting excusal, if anybody is requesting that. And then again, adding anybody to that list that you might be interested in adding. Meetings don't usually have any set time, but you could think, like I said before, they could be finished in 30 minutes. They could be finished at the end of multiple days of meetings, but really try to take somewhere around 1 to 2 hours to schedule for yourself for a meeting, just to make sure you have enough time. And then the next thing here is thinking about if your student is invited, think about, are they missing out on instructional time? And is somebody going to be working with them to make up what they missed, or how is that going to be addressed? Okay. Here are some other things. So that notice of case conference committee meeting, you will receive that document after you've scheduled with somebody. But these are some other things that you can look at. Definitely reviewing your student's current IEP to look at what was written almost a year ago, and seeing what questions you maybe have. You should be getting those progress monitoring reports at least as often as your report cards come home, so you can look at those and see what some of the changes are in that progress monitoring reports. If your student is working on reading comprehension and you see their Lexile level increasing on those, then that's a good indication that that goal is working and things are moving well. What other goals might you want to think about around reading comprehension? You could look at schoolwork and your students' grades, either online or what they're bringing home in their folders, if they're bringing homework in their folders, depending on how old they are, but looking at their schoolwork so you can get an idea of where they are academically in their classes. And then the other thing you can kind of review over is looking at your school communications. What things have you already talked to maybe other teachers that you could bring to the case conference committee meeting? Especially if your student is in middle or high school where they have multiple general education teachers, then you might have talked to the algebra teacher, and the teacher of record doesn't really know that you've been having that correspondence with the algebra teacher. So you can bring that just as something that you've been doing already. All right, and let's talk about some additional planning tips here. So we were talking about an annual review, but if you are having an initial evaluation, your student has not had an IEP before, this is their initial evaluation, you can request a copy of that initial evaluation report prior to the case conference committee meeting where everybody comes together to determine eligibility. That way you can read through that document and understand it before you're talking about it in the meeting. And that should be made available to you within 5 days or more than 5 days before the case conference meeting. You can also ask for a separate meeting prior to that eligibility meeting with somebody who can explain the results of the evaluation, talk to you about what's in that report. That way you have some time to think and reflect before the eligibility meeting. So you can get the document 5 days ahead of time, and with the document, you can request a meeting for somebody to explain that document. If an evaluation report is something that maybe you've not looked at before, that is something that could be useful to you as a parent to help get ready for that meeting. Okay. If your student does have an IEP, reevaluation is something that should be considered every 3 years. So that doesn't mean that your child has to be reevaluated every 3 years, but it means at least every 3 times that you meet, that 3 annual meetings, the case conference committee should look at the last time your student was evaluated and think about if there's extra information that's needed. Maybe there's an additional eligibility category that you want to see if the student qualifies for as you've learned more information, working with the student in special education over that time period. Maybe you don't necessarily want to change the eligibility category, but some updated information. 3 years is a lot of growth and a lot of change for a student. So maybe you just want some new information. You can request that at any time, but the case conference committee looks at that at least every 3 years. Okay. Other things to kind of help before the case conference committee meeting, communication is super helpful no matter where you're at in the IEP process. Like I said before at the beginning, you are an important member of the case conference committee meeting, case conference committee member. So making sure that you have questions that you can speak to, writing those down ahead of time so that you remember them in the meeting. Sometimes those meetings, as people get talking and things get going, it's easy to forget, all of the things that you had stored in your mind at the beginning. So writing those down so you can remember them is helpful. If you know that meeting's coming up, you can also just email teachers, talk to teachers, ask them questions before the meeting. If you have questions ahead of time, you can ask them about that before the meeting occurs. If you want to connect with other parents who have been part of a case conference meeting, I have some resources for you at the end, but InSource is a great place also to connect. They have definitely some experience and some perspectives to share with you there. The next thing I would do is confirm when and where that case conference committee meeting is occurring and who will be attendance. So you'll have that notice of case conference committee document, but if you need to follow up and just double check on that, you can always ask an email about that. And then you can do this before the meeting. You can do this during the meeting and after the meeting, but just sharing how it's best to communicate with you is good for the case conference committee to know. And then do you need a physical copy of the draft for the meeting? A lot of times, just kind of depending on the school, sometimes they'll pull it up on a screen and you'll go through it together. Sometimes they'll have individual paper copies that they'll hand out. Sometimes they'll just be talking through it while it's on a computer. So you can ask about that, and if you want a physical copy of the IEP draft during the meeting, you can ask for that. Okay. So we've talked a little bit about this, but I just wanted to make sure that it was really clear so that you know your rights when you're getting ready for a case conference committee meeting. So one of your rights is that the meeting is held in that mutually agreed upon location, time, and date. So if you are presented with something that does not work with your schedule and your needs, then that is something that should be able to be changed because we are mutually agreeing on those meetings. You can request to participate in the case conference committee meeting other than in person. You can participate in the phone. You can participate virtually. You're all here in Google Meet, so if you're here joining us live, so that is an option. But you do not have to meet in person. The next one here, you can invite people that you would like to support you who have special knowledge of your child. So just make sure that you're communicating who you're bringing so that they can be represented. Reviewing your copy of the notice of procedural safeguards for parents or that navigating the course document will be helpful to know your rights and be aware of them ahead of time. And then, of course, contacting InSource if you have questions or need support because they are just so helpful. Okay. This is just a review with some helpful hints for reviewing and getting ready. So we're reviewing our students' information, their documents. That includes that current IEP, their progress monitoring, their grades, their schoolwork samples, emails and text messages you've sent to school. You're just kind of looking through all of that. You're going to review your notice of case conference so that you know when, where, and why that meeting is happening and who's going to be attending. And then next, when you're getting ready for your case conference committee meeting, reflecting on your priorities and your students' progress, thinking about, what are your students' strengths, what's working well for them, what's not working well. I know my kids share with me more of their frustrations at school about school than they might share with their teachers, that they're struggling with things. So if you're hearing those things at home, if you're going through and you're hearing a lot of thorns, bringing those up so that they can be addressed and the IEP will be helpful. And then, of course, I know I said this a bunch of times, but make sure you're writing down things, write down those questions or concerns you want to have addressed so that they don't get left behind during the meeting. There's nothing that frustrates me more than having something that I really want to talk about and then remembering it as I'm walking out the door, leaving a meeting where maybe I've said, yes, I've had all of my questions answered. I have all my concerns addressed. And then I walk out the door and say, oh man, that one thing I really wanted to take care of. So writing those down is helpful. Okay. So now let's talk about during the meeting. Okay. So of course you are the expert on your child and we want to make sure that you feel confident when you walk into those case conference committee meetings that you are an important member of that committee because you are the expert on your child. Which means that when decisions are made, that you are a part of the decision-making process, okay? Case conference committee meeting decisions are based on feedback from everybody in the case conference, and they're never taken by a majority rule or a vote. We don't make decisions that way in a case conference committee meeting. The goal is really to reach a consensus on the decisions that are made, which means that everybody can live with the decision and move forward with it together. Okay. So some of your rights during the case conference committee meeting to keep in mind for you. You can request a break anytime you need it. And sometimes you might need a break to get your thoughts together and come back, especially if it's a more contentious meeting. Maybe it's a couple minutes, or maybe you need to stop for the day and say, we need to come back to this at another time. And that's okay too. But you can request a break at any time during the case conference meeting. You can and are encouraged to ask questions and give feedback on all of those parts of the IEP. And then you can also bring your own ideas for how the school can support the student. They'll likely have some ideas that they can share, but they are not coming with their plan for what the IEP is going to look like the next year, because your input is important. So as you're reflecting and reviewing, getting ready for the case conference committee meeting, you might think of some ideas that you would like to see included. So definitely bring those ideas and share them during the meeting. You can ask to review any of the data that's talked about during the case conference committee meeting. If you want to see, if they're talking about your student is making growth in a certain area, you can ask to see the data that shows that so that you know what that looks like. Kind of going along with the first point here, you can ask for a continuation of the meeting. So if somebody, we talked about this actually a couple slides ago, if somebody was not able to make it to the meeting and you really wanted them to be there, then you can ask for it to be rescheduled, and that is okay. And then last thing here is if the conversation around evaluation comes up and considering an initial evaluation or a reevaluation, you have the right to refuse that at any time. You do not have to consent to evaluation. Now that means that if that's an initial evaluation that you refuse, that your student would not be eligible for special education services, but that is your choice and that is okay. With a reevaluation, if you refuse the reevaluation, then you're sticking with the current information that you have. Okay. And then after the case conference committee meeting, let's think about some things after the case conference committee meeting. Those finalized IEPs, they need to be provided to you at no cost. Sometimes the teacher of record or whoever is working on that in the case conference committee meeting will be able to document the information during the meeting and print out a finalized copy right there at the end. More than likely, though, there might be some notes from the meeting that need to be typed into the system and get the document all finalized. So that needs to be provided within 10 business days of your meeting. And that means that it can be mailed, but that you should receive it within 10 days of the meeting. And then you as a parent have 10 days from the date that you receive the IEP to respond. So if you sign it and return it, then that means that you agree with the contents. But maybe after you've left the case conference meeting, you receive the final IEP and you've been thinking some more and you want to make some additional changes. Maybe there was something that didn't make it in the final IEP that got talked about in the meeting. Whatever the case may be, you have 10 days from the date that you receive the IEP to respond with any updates. And then if you don't, then that new IEP will just take effect after that. Okay. So here's some next steps that you can take after that case conference committee meeting is over. One thing that we like to share is the parent survey. You can fill out that parent survey and that comes to us at DOE so that we can learn more about your experiences. So you can fill that out after the case conference meeting. You can ask what you can do to support your student. A lot of the things in the case conference committee meeting talk about what's going to happen at school to support your student in school, but you can ask about what you can be doing at home to support your student and make sure that they're working on their goals in the home environment too. We talked about this earlier again, but sharing your communication preferences and making sure that the school has your best contact information. If they know that you prefer an email or a text, then that way they can reach out to you that way first. You can ask how the final copy of your child's IEP will be provided to you if it's not shared at the end of the meeting. You can ask them, are you going to send home a paper copy with my student? Are you going to mail it? Are you going to deliver it electronically? What's the plan there? And that way you know where to expect it from. When you do receive that proposed IEP, though, definitely look through it, read through it, and make sure everything is captured accurately, that it reflects what the case conference committee discussed. And if you need help reviewing that, that's something that you can ask your teacher of record to review that document with you, and that is okay. Remember that you have 10 days to sign that IEP before it goes into effect. And then again, if you have updates or thoughts of how it should be revised, you can do that within those 10 days after the meeting. And then again, if you disagree with that proposed IEP, you can respond with those disagreements there so that those can be revised. And remember that you can call another case conference committee meeting at any time. Oh, I brought it right down to the wire here. I do want to end with some resources for you, and you will receive a copy of these slides if you ask Lisa for them. But these are just some of the some of the resources that are available on our special education website. You can look at these different pieces here. This page right here is got links to the Progress Center. It has a bunch of really great resources to help kind of assist you as you're getting ready for the meeting. This document that's called the Overview of the IEP is available in English and Spanish, and it has just all of the different components of the IEP, what they are, what they're for, what they should include. So as you're reviewing it, you know what should be in there. This meeting guide for families has a lot of the things that we talked about with getting ready for the meeting on it. And then there are blank spaces where you can kind of document your notes. So it's a good note-taking guide to help you if this is something that you're maybe newer to. And then also, I know we have our wonderful state InSource Parent Information Center, but the Center for Parent Information and Resources is our National Parent Information Center. And they also have a couple resources that I just wanted to highlight here for you to look into for some further reading. So with that, I'd just love to hear if anybody has any questions. And I'd like to thank you for your time today.
Maggie, thank you so much. That was a wonderful overview of the special education case conference process. So thank you so much. And yes, we also wanted to share that we have a parent-to-parent guide at InSource that kind of walks hand in hand with Article 7 and navigating the course. And you can find that on our website under resources. Additionally, as Maggie was talking about, you can email your school. Please tell them the things you're thinking of for the meeting. Tell them who you feel is important to be there and why. Good communication most certainly helps extensively. And additionally, if you are looking at the fact you do not agree with the proposal of FAPE, free and appropriate public education, then you can contest and ask for another meeting. So there is an action involved in that. Sometimes you just don't agree and maybe you want to offer an opinion. That is a written document about the fact you're not standing in the way of the IEP, but there are some things you have concerns. So you'll find those in Article 7 and navigating the course. You'll find them in our parent-to-parent guide that you can find on our website. So thank you so much for joining Office Hours with IDOE and InSource. And again, Maggie Hampton, Technical Assistant Specialist from IDOE. I'm Lisa Paddock, Regional Director and Central Team Leader from InSource, and we are the Parent Training Center for Indiana. And next month on the 4th Tuesday, we're going to be talking about a variety of things. Graduation pathways, some documentation that might be needed for medical excusals. So please join us for that because we are extremely excited about that. And please sign up for our newsletter if you're not signed up so that you'll find out all about our webinars and our office hours. So at this point, we do not have any questions. Maggie, we do have thank yous. And so I want to thank you all for joining us. And this will conclude our office hours with IDOE and InSource. And thank you very much and have an excellent day.
Hey, Lisa, this is
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
My email I have for you isn't working. So what is your email address?
Oh, I'm so sorry. L Paddock, Paddack, at insource.org.
Boy, that was tough. Thank you.
Yep, that's all right. Absolutely. And thank you for joining us. Thank you all today. And we appreciate it very much and have an excellent day.